This is Ask the Compound. I'm your host, Ben Carlson. Everyone knows someone who needs to be talked off of a ledge during a correction. Maybe a friend, maybe a relative, maybe a coworker, maybe a client if you're a financial advisor. How do you explain to someone why market timing is a bad idea? We're talking about that on the show today and much more. Stick around.
You got my heart going nice and fast now. I was like, wait, what happened?
askthecompoundshow@gmail.com if you have a question for us. On today's show, we tackle questions straight from our audience about how a young financial advisor can talk their clients off of a ledge, trying to sell during a correction. Is Palantir a 10-bagger waiting to happen? Is that one in your portfolio, Duncan?
It has been on and off. Not right now.
Should you sell your rental property with a baby on the way? How to prepare for a regional recession in Washington, D.C., and how will the top 10 names in the S&P 500 change over the next decade? Glad to have everyone here on the live chat. I see people are already fretting about tariffs. That's good. I'm staying out of that one. Thank you for watching live on Twitter. Send us a question live. We will answer it live on the show as well. Let's get into it. We got good stuff today.
Okay. Up first, we got a question from Samuel. I'm a relatively new advisor and have been receiving calls from clients wanting to move to cash because of recent volatility. How do you explain to clients that market timing is a bad decision? How can you talk them off the ledge while being sensitive to their emotions?
Excellent question. Let's bring in an actual financial advisor to help answer this question. Kevin Young works with dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of families at Real Wealth Management. How many clients these days, Kevin?
Dozens and dozens is accurate.
All right. So some people assume that all retail or mom and pop investors just buy high and sell low. And we know that's not the case. If wealth management clients are also undisciplined, then how did they become wealthy in the first place, right? But there are many clients who need a check-in during a downturn, right? And because there's certainly clients who are just fine. Like, hey, I got it. You set expectations, or I set expectations. They're fine. So how do you handle those clients who inevitably need to be talked off the ledge? Because we know that they exist. Mm-hmm. Every advisor has at least one or two that they know, like, I have to reach out and talk to this person every time there's a correction. Right. What's the strategy?
So I think the first thing to realize is if you're a young advisor right now, it doesn't feel like it, but you have to go through these things, and it's great to go through it early in your career because it's going to make you a better advisor in the long run. Our CEO, Josh, reiterated to us the other day something he had written back in 2020 in the middle of March of the pandemic, which was, this is our Super Bowl. This is why people hire an advisor, is to help them through these kinds of scenarios. And I think ultimately, if you're an advisor, as you're bringing clients on, one of the questions that I ask a lot is, what did you do in, depending on the age, 2008? What did you do in 2020? What did you do in 2022 with your portfolio? And for the prospects or clients that say, I sold everything and went to cash, those are the people that when we're having a situation like this, those are the people that probably need to hear from you. The people that say, hey, actually I did nothing, or I bought, you probably don't need to call them right away. They're probably feeling okay. But ultimately, the message that I think needs to go out to clients who are feeling anxious is going back to the financial plan and understand, why did we invest? What's the long term? There's so much good data out there that shows that, as little as we want to say this is a regular thing, this is a garden variety correction, these things happen. And this is a feature, not a bug in the market. And so just to remind people that, why you're investing, what the timeline is, and go back to the plan. Because if the plan has changed, sure, then we can talk about maybe it makes sense to change allocations. But if that hasn't changed, then really it's for us, I think, about just providing some comfort and some real data around what's going on.
Right. The corrections are a feature, not a bug. I like your idea of asking people how they behaved in the past, because the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior for a lot of people. And the good thing is, there are clients who can graduate. There's clients that we've dealt with in the past who would freak out every time that there was volatility. And if you set enough reasonable expectations and you run them through the financial plan enough times, and they can actually graduate from freaking out to just being okay and steady-handed. But there are also those clients who just need it no matter what. And that's one of the reasons that they come to you. Not every advisor or not every client needs an advisor to be their psychologist during a correction, but some people definitely do. They need that emotional support, and that's what they need. And again, I think your point about knowing your audience and knowing which clients need it you have to get ahead of those ones. You can't wait for them to reach out to you. You have to be proactive and reach out to them and know that they're probably going to be the ones to freak out. So I think that's good advice too for the young people is do you actually know and understand your clients enough to know which ones need some help?
What
Yeah,
percentage
it's
of clients would you say are just kind of like set it and forget it? Like, I have you now. I don't want to ever pay attention to this. Just let me know if there's ever a problem.
I think if I'm thinking about my business, and I assume that mine is probably similar to a lot of advisors, is that you probably have 10 to 20% of your clients that that literally don't care, right? And those are probably the ones that have been with you the longest and maybe have been through these with you before, and they just know what we're going to say. The vast then I would say there's probably another middle 60% that are probably okay, but maybe they'd like just some quick commentary or just a quick, hey, everything, like, this is why we did X, Y, and Z. This is why we own this and this and this. And then there's probably the last 20% that are really need to be talked out of going to cash. And again, I think the longer you work with people, the more they shift into that top 20% or even that middle 60. And that's another reason why I think it's really important to don't just have them fill out a risk tolerance questionnaire, because often people answer that. If they're answering that in the middle of a bull market, guess what? They're more aggressive. If they're answering it now, they're probably more conservative. So that's why I like really getting into the crux of, like, how do you feel about the markets? What did you do when? Because if somebody says I'm aggressive and they're calling you right now saying put me into cash, they shouldn't be in an aggressive portfolio in the first place.
Yeah, your risk perception changes depending on the market. I don't mean your risk profile changes, but
Right.
yes. And I made this point last week that we've never had a client who came to us and said, you know how I got rich? I timed every market correction perfectly. It doesn't
Right.
happen. So, but it's also true that we pay way more attention to this stuff than the clients, rightfully so. And they need some of them need regular reminders to set expectations and realize, so you can't really overlook that fact that some people really just need more of a helping hand.
Yeah, and
That's your job.
that's why they hire us. People hire us for peace of mind. And if talking to us for a half an hour in the middle of a nasty correction allows them to not worry as much about this and focus on their day-to-day and their family and their job, that's why they hire us.
Yeah. Dave in the comments says this is why it helps to have a written investment policy. And I totally agree, because it's always good to have a reminder of what were your goals when we set out to do this. Right. And I've never heard anyone say my goal is I'm going to jump in before a correction happens. I'm going to jump, I'm going to jump out and then I'm going to jump back in. I'm going to jump out. And no one ever says that's my financial goal, right? It just, you want to have your hands on the steering wheel when things get hairy, and that doesn't help. Anyway, Kevin needs to get out of here. He's got to go work with an actual client right now.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks,
I'm
guys.
sure it's a great client, though. Thank you, Kevin. All right, let's do another one.
Okay. Up next, we have a question from Mohammed. In 2021, I kept buying Palantir as it dropped. At its peak, my $24,000 investment ballooned to $240,000. Not to brag.
10 bagger.
Yeah.
10 bragger, maybe? Eh?
Yeah. Oh, I like it. I like it. By some miracle, I managed to sell 500 shares at $124 just 3 hours before the stock crashed to the 80s. That sale alone more than doubled my principal. So I have no plans to sell the remaining shares for at least another 8 years, as I'm holding them for a personal milestone I'm working toward. Am I crazy for holding? I see it as a calculated risk. Am I willing to put down $180,000 in pursuit of making millions? To me, the answer is yes. It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Mohammed, very nice not to brag here.
Yeah.
I just have one question before he proceeds here. Can he tell us what Palantir does? Do you think he knows? How many people actually know what Palantir does?
I hear military contracts, AI.
Yeah, data storage, something.
Data.
All right. Daniel, chart on here. This is Palantir. Going back to their IPO, you can see it's a massive run-up. You can see how he got a 10-bagger buying in 2021 on the way down. Had a severe pullback, which makes sense. So the stock was up 170% in 2023, 340% in 2024. So a 35 to 40% pullback is not out of the... That's completely normal to me in context of those gains. You can do chart off. It's now a 200 billion-ish company. So if he thinks his stake at 180 could be worth millions, he's talking about making Palantir a $1 trillion company. I mean, maybe crazier things have happened. There are far more members of the Quattro Comma Club than I would have anticipated 10 years ago, right? There's 6 or 7, depending on the day, that are $1 trillion companies. Here's what I like about his strategy. He's playing with house money. He already took some off the table. He said he took his principal and doubled it, right? So he took what he put in and doubled it, and he's still got 180K on the table. I just have a few questions for him because this is an opportunity cost thing. He did have the one 10 bagger already. He's looking for another 10 bagger, which, what's a 10 bagger on top of a 10 bagger? I don't know, a lot of bags. Like, think about it this way. What if you took some of that money and used it for a down payment on a house? What if you used it for a boat or a snowmobile or a jet ski or some other fun toy? I don't know what people are doing these days. What if you peeled some off and took a really nice vacation, right? I just rewatched season 1 of White Lotus. 4 seasons in Maui, right? Something really nice. I'm just trying to frame your opportunity cost in a different way here. You didn't make enough money to ride off into the sunset, but you did make enough to at least consider what you'd do with the proceeds of a massive win. And you want to make sunset money. And listen, his strategy is, this is how you get 10 baggers and probably why I will never get them. I guess I've gotten a 10 bagger in VTI and Bitcoin. That's about it. That's probably about all it's going to happen for me. But it sounds like he has the right expectations in place. I would just, like, I don't know. What if you took a little bit more off the table just in case this growth stock crash gets out of hand or Palantir doesn't become a $1 trillion company? I don't know. What if you cut your stake in half and still let that money ride? Is it if it 10x's from here, are you really going to be kicking yourself that much? I'm just throwing it out there. Could you split the difference a little bit more? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I can't imagine the discipline it would take to watch this go up 10x again. Like, really, you're already playing with house money. It doubles. You're not going to take some significant, profits on that. It seems, I mean, good for you if you can do it. But like you're saying, you're kind of, you're really wanting a lot of things to fall right into place for that.
The thing that makes this really hard is that in the past 15 years, this kind of thing has happened. Companies went up a lot, and like Apple, you could have said in the mid 2010s, Apple has gone up way too much. There's no way it can continue. And it did. Same thing with Facebook and Microsoft and Amazon and all these companies and Google. Like, there's no way that these companies can continue to outperform the way they have. And they did. NVIDIA, same thing. Like, how can it keep going up? It just does. There are also a lot of other cases where stocks went up a lot and then they've never gotten back to their peak again. Ever. There's lots of cases of that. So I would be careful. He's got the right expectations in mind. I'm just saying, would you be kicking yourself in 10 years if Palantir goes nowhere and you could have gone, you know what, I could have just bought a boat, or I could have done something with that money. I'm just throwing it out there for opportunity cost sake.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who's had some 10 baggers before, it is a little addictive, but then you end up losing money on a lot of the picks. I'd say you probably end up, in most cases, in my case at least, you probably end up barely, coming out on top, because you have to pick. You're not picking like the mainstream stocks if you're trying to get a 10 bagger in a shorter period of time. Obviously, like you're saying, if you hold Apple over a decade, okay, yeah, maybe, but yeah, it's one of those
Duncan,
things.
you just slid that in there that you've got some 10 baggers, huh?
I have, yeah. And Neo was my first one, I think, years ago.
Well, it's like it works out like a VC portfolio. You're never going to do it for all of your companies, but yeah, if you hold 10 stocks and one of them is a 10 bagger, it probably makes up for all the other ones that don't go anywhere.
Right.
But I think he's got the right expectations in place. I just think through the opportunity cost. All right, let's do another one.
Yeah. And congrats. Good job.
Yeah, way to go.
Okay. Up next, we've got a question from Tenzing. I own a rental property in Denver and am evaluating whether to sell it in 2025 or keep it long term. My wife and I are expecting our second child, and she will likely not work for the next 2 to 3 years. The equity from selling the rental would help replace her salary and provide a cash cushion for emergencies. We prefer to keep our finances simple, but not at the cost of long-term financial loss. We purchased the property for $335,000 in 2017 and would expect it to sell for $450,000 in 2025. The mortgage rate is 2.75% with 15 years remaining, and we receive rental income of $2,195 a month. Does it make more sense to sell the rental and invest elsewhere, or keep it for long-term wealth building?
All right. This is classic finance brain versus life event question. I'm curious what people in the chat think. Sell it or hold it? Because I guess it's almost like spreadsheet versus sleep at night kind of thing. Although I guess if you have a baby on the way, you're not sleeping at night anyway. So maybe that cancels it out. But come on, Duncan, that was funny. Two simple answers. If you want flexibility, sell it. If you prefer income, keep it. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have the finance brain, like me, who'd say 2.75% mortgage rate. You're in Denver. People love going there to move. Mountains, skiing, hiking, sun, all this stuff. Future upside with the equity kicker. Why would you sell it? I've personally never owned a rental property, so I can't speak of this from experience. But I do have 3 kids, so I can speak from that experience. And I guess, do you really want to continue being a landlord with multiple children? We've talked about the childcare side of things on this show a couple times over the years, and not an easy decision to make. One of the parents stays home, you're foregoing income potential. If both of the parents work, you're paying up the wazoo for daycare. It's a lot. We had 3 kids in daycare at the same time for 2 years. I always complain about this. It was a second mortgage payment for us. They've already made this decision. Wife is going to stay home for 2 to 3 years. I think having the ability to provide for your family with a financial backstop that allows her to do that sounds pretty enticing to me. When I mean by selling, right? Giving that flexibility, having that cash cushion. So I think I would prefer the flexibility, even if it means giving up a sound financial asset like this. I just think your life is so much more chaotic when this happens. And people always make the joke that going from 1 to 2 kids is kind of like going from 1 to 4. It's a lot more to deal with. And
they could sell it and give the money to Muhammad to invest for another 10-bagger.
There you go. A lot of people say, well, the rental income is the wife's income. I don't know what the net income is, right? Some people are saying just hire a rental management company. That's fine. I wouldn't want to get into a situation where you're in a pinch and you are forced to sell it, and then you have to sell it really quick, and you're hustling, and that's the tough part about it. I get the whole idea of, man, why would we ever give up this mortgage rate? And we're getting income that probably more than covers the mortgage. It's a lot. I think the flexibility when you have kids, that to me, I wouldn't be able it would be hard to turn that down. That's all I'm saying.
This is probably a dumb question, but I'm a millennial that doesn't own a home and probably won't for a very long time. When you sell a house in their situation like that, do you pay taxes on that sale? Is it like capital gains?
You'll pay some taxes, yes.
Okay. All right.
So especially
I
since
would
it's a
assume,
second home.
but I just wasn't sure.
The finance brain seems to be winning in the chat. Everyone keeps saying hold. Hold. Some people say no tenants, but a lot of people are saying hold.
Well, the poll, I'm running a poll right now, and 58% are saying sell. So
okay.
We got a disparity between the comments and the polling.
All right. I would be curious what the wife says. I would love to hear her take on this. Okay. Follow up with us. Let us know what happens. Let's do another one.
Okay. Up next, we got a question from Michael. As someone living in suburban DC, where all signs point to a regional recession due to job and funding cuts at federal agencies and government contractors, how would you recommend preparing for a sudden regional recession?
Great question. We talk a lot about the recessions for the overall economy, but there could be sector or regional recessions even when the economy is doing just fine. I have a friend who's a realtor. I have another friend who works in a loan department at a bank that does mortgages, right? They've effectively been in a recession for 2 years already. Their business has effectively dried up, right? When COVID hit, I wrote a blog post called Creating an Overreaction Plan for the Coronavirus. I wrote this on March 12th, 2020. So that's exactly 5 years ago to the day. So this was the day after it was announced Tom Hanks had COVID, remember? And then Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz, and they shut the NBA down.
I remember.
And it was immediately.
I also remember we're working out of the Bryant Park office every time 5 days a week, and the first case in New York City was some doctor across Bryant Park in a building across Bryant Park from us, and we were all just like, "Uh-oh."
It's okay. It's not like the subways are germ machines or anything.
Right.
Pretty good predictions there, if I do say so myself. I talked about how schools are going to be closing, and it wasn't exact. I kind of nailed it, and I said we're going into a recession, which wasn't going out in a limbo by any means. But that was kind of making a plan on the fly for people who didn't have one. And this isn't quite that, but it's a little bit like that. So I think a lot of it depends on your circumstances. Do you actually work for the federal government? Do you plan on buying or selling a home in the next few years? So I think that's probably a worry for people. Like maybe the DC home market is going to be softening up a little bit. Is your career personally impacted by these cuts, or are you just more worried about ripple effects because you live in the area, right? Do you have a buyout offer on the table? If I worked for the federal government, I would be seriously considering taking a buyout right now. If I thought I could get a job in the private sector, I would seriously be thinking about it. because I've talked to plenty of people who work in the federal government for different places, and the uncertainty of it all, I think, would probably weigh on me. This is obviously where an emergency fund comes in big time. If you lose a job or lose a source of income, or just the kind of business that you thought was going to happen is not going to be happening in the years ahead, I think that the emergency fund is going to come big time. And if you're personally impacted by this, it's time to figure out places in your budget to cut the fat. Everyone has been spending like crazy the last 3 or 4 years. It's not fun to cut back, but I do think a combination of a high savings rate and a low burn rate is a really good margin of safety to have. If you're worried and things are getting dicey, that makes sense to me of figuring out ways to cut back on stuff. And if that means not taking a vacation this year because you're worried, then you have to do it. It doesn't sound like very much fun, but if you're really that worried about it, then you have to cut back on stuff.
A lot of government workers are getting hit with a double whammy right now too, because I saw that the Trump administration is pulling back PSLF, public student loan forgiveness, with a bunch of conditions. And so, yeah, a lot of people have taken lower paying government jobs instead of going to, Deloitte or similar, private sector company, because they were going to get PSLF, and now they might not get that. So yeah, they're really going through right now. And I used to live in DC. A lot of people don't understand this, but every 4 years there's a lot of turnover, right? Because a new administration,
Right.
most of the time coming in and cleaning house. But this is different because they're not just swapping positions out; they're eliminating positions, right? So yeah,
But
that
if you're
region's going to
going,
be hit hard.
yeah, but if you're going from the public sector and you can move to the private sector, I'd be thinking about it at least.
Right. Yeah.
All right, we got one more question.
Okay. Up next, we got one from Mitchell. Do you think the S&P 500 top 10 will change over the next 10 years?
Okay, I love this topic. It's something I've tracked for years. Daniel, table on. So I've done this for a while, and I looked at the top 10 holdings in the S&P every 5 years going back to 1980, and plotted them on here. I updated this morning for the top 10 currently. You can see the top 10 is the weighting is definitely higher than it's been in a long time. In 1995, the top 10 made up less than 18%. Today, it makes up 35% of the total, so it's definitely higher. A few things stand out. You can leave it up here, Daniel. There are companies that can stay in the top 10 for a very long time. IBM was all the way there till 1990, and I think they were in the top of the heap going back to the 60s, if memory serves. Exxon was in the top 10 from 1980 to 2015 before finally dropping out, and actually they're back in the top 15 now, so maybe they're getting close. Same thing with General Electric, was there for a while. Microsoft first made an appearance in 95 and has more or less been around the top 10 every year since, despite dropping out for a few years after the dot-com bubble. You can do chart off now, Daniel. But the other pattern is there's lots of turnover. So this table covers the top 10 every 5 years going back to 1980. Carry the one, that's 100 slots, right, Duncan? I count 42 different companies in total. So that's an average of, say, 4 new companies that enter the top 10 every 5 years or so. And it's also true that in between those periods, there's plenty of companies that have jumped in and out. So Tesla is not in the top 10 right now because they just crashed. But they were in the top 10 a few months ago. And the same thing, NVIDIA was not in the top 10 as recently as 2020. Now it's one of the biggest stocks. So yes, I think the top 10 will change over the next 10 years. Apple and Microsoft were the only big tech stocks in the top 10 in 2010. Now it's basically all big tech stocks. The hard part is which stocks will drop out and which new stocks will come in. I have no idea. I think it's interesting to look at the performance of these big stocks too. So Daniel, throw up the next chart. DFA did this really cool study that looks at the returns of the companies in the 3, 5, and 10 years before joining the top 10. And those companies went crazy. You can see 27% outperformance, 20% outperformance, 12% outperformance. And then they enter the top 10. And then 3 years afterwards, they do okay, and then they slightly underperform 5 and 10 years out. So you want to catch these stocks as they're getting up and coming into the top 10. Once they get into the top 10, then they don't do as well. You can do chart off, Daniel. This is one of the reasons why I find studying market history both helpful and not always actionable, because I know corrections in bear markets will happen, but I can't predict when they will happen, right? No one was predicting that this correction was going to happen like this so fast, where we'd go new all-time highs to 10% correction like that, right? But we know that corrections can happen. And I know a handful of the current crop of top 10 names will not be there in 5 to 10 years. I do not know which ones it will be. I could guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is a podcast. Guess. What do you think would be
I've
the-
always said, I'm not going to call it Meta. I always say Facebook, right? That makes the most sense to me, even though it seems like they're doubling down on AI. And I would imagine there's going. See, I was thinking about this the other day. Apple and Amazon had Siri and Alexa forever, right? And why did they not double down and have the world's greatest AI with those voice machines already? And then a company like, then we have ChatGPT come along and completely take them out because they just didn't want to or care. And so I think there's going to be a handful of like AI companies that come up and are in the new top 10 and pushes some of these old big ones out of the way. I just don't know why. And so this is why I index, Duncan, because I let the market pick the winners for me, right?
Do you have a controversial pick? If you had to pick something that is not there right now, what would you bet on
To
being
come
there?
up for the top
Yeah,
20?
to come and take a seat on the top 10.
I mean, it's going to be like a robotics company or something, right? Robotics and AI. Do I know which company? No, I'm not good at these things. Again, that's why I buy index funds, because I know they're going to bring in the leaders and the losers don't mean as much. GE was the biggest stock in the world in the 1990s and early 2000s, and it's just stunk ever since then. And it didn't matter because we had Nvidia and we had Apple and we had all those other ones. So I would love to give you a good stock pick. That's what's going to happen, but I would be totally wrong. So I'm not going to do it.
Okay.
I'm a boring boglehead guy.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, people are on the edge of their seats, but yeah, it's Dave Airy says it won't be oat milk. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely not. I would definitely not bet on Oatly being in the top 10. Yeah, probably not gonna happen.
Okay. So, but yes, I would be shocked if we didn't see a handful of these companies out in the years ahead, even though it seems like they're going to be so entrenched. Sorry, it's coming. All right. Thanks to everyone in the live chat, as always. I see Bill Sweet chopping it up in there with the folks.
Look at that.
Thanks to Kevin for coming on and helping on as he was ready to hop on a client call.
Almost 2,800 people watching live right now. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for everyone in the live chat, watching live on Twitter. Ask us a live question if you want. We'll always be happy to answer those. Email us, askthecompoundshow@gmail.com. Leave us a comment, a question, a review. We always appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
And go Seahawks.